Welcome to Risk Management Training, ASU Registered Student Organizations by the Multicultural and Student Activities Programs Office. As a representative of your student organization, you are responsible for sharing this information to your organization. Here is our contact information for both Erica Baeza and myself. Our office is located in the Houston Hart University Center, room 114. Our office number is 325-942-2729. If you have any questions, feel free to contact us or our office anytime, Monday through Friday, from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. The Texas Education Code Section 51.9361 was passed in 2007 to provide student organization officers and advisors with training on risk management. Clay R. Warren, an ambitious Texas Tech freshman, met his untimely end in an automobile accident while returning from his fraternity's event on September 21, 2002. Warren's story will be utilized in an endeavor to educate and inform students and faculty alike about an array of risk management processes and concerns. State law requires student organizations to complete a risk management training in order to be considered a registered student organization, to promote safety and positive experiences. Risk management is a process of considering the potential and perceived risk involved in student activities. It includes monitoring organization activity and taking both corrective action and proactive steps to minimize accidental injury and/or loss. Under the law, advisors must attend risk management training once every other academic year. RSO presidents and officers must attend annually. Officers and advisors must provide training content to full membership. What is risk management? The process of assessing potential risk involved and cost-benefit of conducting an activity or event. It includes monitoring organization activities and implementing controls and procedures to proactively minimize consequences of an incident and/or loss. This includes physical bodily injuries that occur from participation of an activity. Obvious risks such as rope climbing. Less obvious, such as a foodborne illness from a picnic. Other injuries, illnesses, death, hazing, sexual assault, or excessive drinking are high-risk physical risks. Reputation. Incidents that may lead to defamation or portray a bad image of the individual officers or members present. The reputation of the student's organization and the reputation of the university as a whole. This also includes the media, alumni, family, donors, viewers from other members of the community. Emotional. Incidents that alienate or harm the feelings of members of the community. That is selecting a theme for your event that stereotypes or offends a particular group. Hazing, sexual assault, eating disorders, alcohol, and drug abuse is included in emotional risk. Financial. Occurrences that negatively impact the physical stability of the organization. Paying for damages incurred by the band you booked to play on campus, theft or misuse of funds due to poor accounting, money handling, fundraising, budgets, and overall financial oversight. Last but not least, facilities. Includes both safety and the facilities used by your members or participants and the maintenance of those facilities.
Hi, I'm James Adams, Chief of Police at Angelo State. As part of this state-mandated training, I'll be taking the next few minutes to cover some topics important to mitigating risks to student organizations and to better inform and prepare students to enhance their safety and well-being. Here are some of the topics that we'll be covering as part of this segment. Well, let's get started with alcohol and drug violations. Let's discuss ASU's policies and some of the consequences associated with violating Texas law and university regulations. Policies on alcoholic beverages and underage drinking are formulated in accordance to laws set forth by the state of Texas and regulations passed by the Texas Tech University system. In Texas, you must be 21 years of age or older to purchase, possess, and consume alcohol. Some of the most common violations we tend to see are public intoxication. This occurs when someone is in a public place while intoxicated to the degree in which they become a danger to themselves or others. Minor in possession is a minor under the age of 21 who's found to be in possession of alcohol. Third, minor in consumption is a minor who's under the age of 21 who has consumed any detectable amount of alcohol. A fourth category is what we call driving under the influence. Driving under the influence is a minor who has consumed alcohol of any amount and is operating a motor vehicle. This is not to be confused with the driving while intoxicated. This is any detectable amount of alcohol. This violation is a Class C misdemeanor, which can lead to a fine up to $500, 8 to 12 hours of community service, 30-day suspension of their driver's license, and mandated alcohol awareness education. All the other alcohol violations I discussed are Class C misdemeanors, which are punishable by a fine not to exceed $500. Students and their organizations are subject to criminal charges and civil proceedings and university sanctions through the Office of Student Conduct. University sanctions can include academic probation, alcohol education programming, suspension, or expulsion. It's important to note university disciplinary action can take place whether the violation took place on or off campus. Overall, the prevalency of alcohol drinking amongst college students over the past 29 years has declined, measured over the lifetime, annual, and the past 30 days of consumption. Since 1991, lifetime consumption rates among college students has declined 15% proportionally, while annual consumption and monthly consumption rates are down 12% and 17% respectively. Purchasing or furnishing alcohol to a minor is a serious offense in Texas. Furnishing alcohol to a minor or providing a place for a minor to consume alcohol is a Class A misdemeanor. A Class A misdemeanor is one step below a felony charge. This means anyone found purchasing or furnishing alcohol to a minor is subject to being arrested. Police officers have no discretion and they must effect an arrest. Consequences of this can be a fine up to $4,000 and up to a year in jail. Again, it's important to remember, if you're having a party at your house or apartment, you are responsible. If one minor is found to be consuming alcohol at your party, you're subject to being charged with furnishing alcohol to a minor. Angelo State policy prohibits the use, possession, and distribution of alcohol and illegal drugs on all university property. Possession and consumption of alcohol in resident halls is strictly prohibited. Although university policy restricts the possession and consumption of alcohol in residence halls, drinking is permitted at the Vanderventer apartments if the following things occur. All the residents and guests are of the age of 21 or older. They have the allowed amount of guests that do not violate housing policy, which is 2 per resident, and there's no associated behavior that is disruptive or destructive. Possession or consumption of alcohol at certain university facilities may be permitted or restricted at the discretion of the university president. This includes events such as the Blue and Gold Auction, alumni and donor relation events, and Rand Jams, just to name a few. University-recognized and/or funded student organizations may not sponsor events and/or activities open to the general public where alcohol beverages are served or consumed without the written approval of the university president. A request to serve alcohol form must be completed, submitted, and approved by the president. It is illegal to use, manufacture, possess, sell, and/or distribute substances outlined by the Texas Health and Safety Code. Violations can result in criminal charges punishable by imprisonment from 180 days up to 99 years in prison, and hefty fines depending on the substance type and the amount. When discussing what constitutes an official gathering, it's important to know if 25% of the individuals present at a social event, party, or etc. are members of a student organization, that gathering becomes a sponsored RSO event. What is the 911 Lifeline law in Texas? The 911 Life Law provides immunity from prosecution to someone under the age of 21 who has consumed alcohol if they are seeking medical attention for someone who they suspect is suffering from alcohol poisoning. Having said that, there are some requirements under this law. They must be the one who's called for help. They must remain at the scene until first responders arrive, and it must fully cooperate with EMS and law enforcement. Some common signs of alcohol poisoning are unconscious or semi-conscious, no response to pain, slow or irregular breathing, low body temperature, slow heart rate, bluish or pale, cold, clammy skin, vomiting while sleeping or passed out. Can your organization be held responsible for the individual's behavior at a party? And the answer is yes. The degree to which an organization is responsible for the behavior of its members is not necessarily dependent on the number of members engaging in the activity, but depends on whether that activity is related to the organization. In addition to the group being held responsible, members, officers, and even advisors may be held responsible for an individual member's actions and behavior. The possession of a usable amount of marijuana, typically under 2 ounces, is still an offense in Texas. This is a Class B misdemeanor. The penalty for that is confinement in jail for up to 180 days and a fine not to exceed $2,000. Finally, let's talk about campus carry at ASU. Individuals are allowed to carry a concealed handgun into campus buildings if they possess a license to carry. The exception is when there is a posted signage stating that handguns are prohibited. These signs are typically referred to as 30-06 signs. A person violating this signage is subject to being arrested and charged for criminal trespassing. Constitutional carry allows anyone to carry a concealed handgun on campus if they are 21 years of age or older, but they are restricted from entering any campus building. There's also another variety of restrictions placed upon campus carry. Under campus carry, universities were able to further regulate where handguns could be carried as long as it did not overly prohibit the rights of license to carry holders. Some of the areas prohibited by law and university regulations include college sporting events, UIL-sanctioned campus events, the campus health clinic, certain labs which contain certain types of chemicals, all graduations, and any location on campus where alcohol is being served. This concludes our presentation. We trust this information has been useful and will further assist in ensuring the safety of all across the Ram family. We wish each of you much success at Angelo State, and as always, go Rams.
My name is Bradley Petty, and I'm the Dean of Students. I'd like to welcome you to Angelo State University. A service provided by the Office of the Dean of Students relates to the University Code of Student Conduct. Students and associated groups are expected to demonstrate respect for the rights and the property of others. In alignment with this, the university has established standards of conduct to foster a safe environment for the entire university community. The standards of behavior are outlined in the Code of Student Conduct, were developed to uphold the safety, security, and dignity of all members of our educational community. Enrollment at Angelo State University is considered implicit acceptance of the standards of conduct contained in the Code and other policies applicable to students. These are educational in nature and designed to help students understand expectations and accept responsibility for their own actions. The Code of Student Conduct applies to behaviors which are on university premises, at university-sponsored activities, and may also apply to off-campus behaviors. Recently, hazing has been a focus of both university policy and Texas law. Hazing is a violation of the Code of Student Conduct as well as criminal act under the Texas state law. By definition, hazing is any intentional, knowing, or reckless act occurring on or off campus by one person alone or acting with others, directed against a student for the purpose of pledging, being initiated into, affiliated with, holding office in, or maintaining membership in any organization whose membership consists primarily of students. There are several examples of hazing, but these are not an encompassing list. One is any type of physical brutality, any type of activity that subjects the student to an unreasonable risk of harm or adversely affects the mental or physical health of students. Activities that involve consumption of a substance, such as liquor or drugs, which subjects the student to an unreasonable risk of harm. Activities that encourage another student in hazing. And not reporting any act of hazing. One special note is that written or verbal consent cannot be used as a defense to any charge that violates university policy or state laws. Students may be prosecuted for committing an act of hazing or for failing to report firsthand knowledge of a violation. Penalties of hazing include, but are not limited to, fines, community service, and jail time. The university will also investigate violations of hazing, which may result in sanctions up to expulsion. Hazing is not just a fraternity or sorority issue. Organizations such as athletic teams, club sports, intramural teams, or honor societies found to have committed an act of hazing may be disciplined to include permanently removing the organization from campus. Your reputation for the organization or the university depends on the actions of your members. Being proactive and communicate university expectations of our core values relating to integrity, diversity and inclusion, significance, community, and commitment to ensure a safe and enjoyable experience for all involved. By employing the Hazing Prevention Network, we can foster unity, develop problem-solving and leadership skills, instill a sense of membership, promote scholarship, and aid in career goals. Being a part of the RAM Fam means holding each other to the high standards that we have here at Angelo State. This means that anyone can report perceived violations of the Code of Student Conduct or can file a complaint to the Office of the Dean of Students. It is important that complaints regarding alleged misconduct are reported as soon as possible after the misconduct occurs. Reports may be submitted online at angelo.edu/incident-form by visiting our office in the Houston Hart University Center, Suite 112, or by calling 325-942-2047. We welcome you to Angelo State University and the RAM Fam. Please accept our best wishes for a great semester. If we can be of further assistance to you, please let us know.
Hi, my name is Michelle Miller, and I am the Special Assistant to the President and Title IX Coordinator. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about Title IX and the resources that our office offers students. Our main goal today is just making sure that you and anyone in your organization that might need to access our services knows where to find us, and even just direct your friends or anyone who you think could benefit from visiting with us. We just want you to know where to go to locate those services. And so if there's anything you learned today, remember my name and remember that we're located in the Meyer Administration Building, room 210. If for whatever reason we're not in the office, you can always email me and schedule an appointment, or if you'd like, just to avoid taking a chance at missing us, we're out sometimes for doing presentations, or we might be meeting with a student. You can always email ahead of time and schedule an appointment. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what Title IX is, how to report incidents of Title IX. I want to visit with you a little bit about consent, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how my office will follow up if you report something, or even if you report something for a friend. So what is Title IX? Title IX is actually a federal law that covers gender discrimination in education. So early on, we thought of Title IX as really, when I was younger, Title IX focused more prevalently on athletics. So if a men's team received new uniforms, the women's teams got new uniforms as well. But in the last 5 to 6 years, Title IX has evolved to address all forms of gender discrimination, which also includes sexual misconduct or misconduct that is gender-based or gender-based violence. So when I use the term sexual misconduct, that's a really broad term that covers all of these behaviors. So sexual misconduct encompasses everything from gender-based discrimination or harassment. So I want to be clear real quick on this one that fraternities and sororities are able to limit who participates in those organizations based on gender. There's a federal law that protects that. Other than that, if you were to tell someone that wanted to join your organization that they couldn't because of their gender or their gender identity, so the way that they identify or express themselves, that would be a violation of our Title IX policy. It would be considered discrimination. Sexual exploitation is the taking or sharing of explicit photos without a person's consent. So if your partner were to give you permission to take an explicit photo, that would be just fine, although we never recommend that, right? Once it's out there, you can't get it back. But there wouldn't be any kind of violation with that, right? That would be consensual sharing between two consenting adults. If your partner then were to share that with their, organization without your permission, that would be considered sexual exploitation. So one thing I always like to cover on this when we're visiting with students is that just because you sent the photo, or if someone said, hey, I'll pay you $50 for a photo, and you send the photo, there's no need to worry about getting in trouble for doing that, okay? That's not a violation of our policy, and we want to help you address that issue, and we'll walk through what we can do to support you on that, even if it may be someone you don't know or something that happened online. The next form of behavior I want to talk about is stalking. So stalking, when I was in college, and you saw my picture earlier, I'm quite a bit older than all of you, that used to mean that someone would maybe wait outside your classroom or your apartment, maybe your car, but they would physically follow you, and that might threaten or scare you. Now we know that this often happens online or via social media, but it's a consistent form of behavior that creates fear or intimidation. So that's another issue that's covered by our office. Sexual harassment. So this is unwanted sex-based conduct that is severe, persistent, or pervasive. So really what I want you to think about is sex-based conduct that is unwanted, okay? So if it's something that's happening to you and you don't want it to be happening and it's based on sex or it's of a sexual nature, that's where we can step in and help. So even if it may not rise to the level of a policy violation, we still want to serve as a resource for you to address that type of behavior or misconduct. So we understand that sometimes it might be intimidating to tell someone, hey, I feel uncomfortable with that, or maybe your roommate's hanging up posters of, that are sexually explicit and you don't want that. We can help you work through that even if you don't want to file a formal complaint, or even if it means, there's not a policy violation. We want to serve as a resource for you in how to address that type of potential misconduct, because we want it to stop, right? The whole main goal of our office is to stop, prevent, and ensure that, these things don't happen in the future. So interpersonal violence, so this is domestic violence or dating violence, okay? So this occurs when there's some type of romantic relationship, and it doesn't have to mean that it's a defined relationship. It's just some sort of social or romantic relationship that involves two individuals. They can be of either sex, and there's some type of intimidation and power and control dynamic that's going on, right? So typically when we think of dating violence, we think of something physical. It can be mental and emotional. It can also be financial. It could be even based on your education. So your partner refuses to let you access your computer the day of an exam. Maybe it's that they take your keys and you can't get to class, right? So there's a lot of different types of behaviors that can lead up to dating violence, or that can be early warning signs of dating violence. So this is something I always want to make sure that students understand when it comes to being a member of the RAM fam, right? So we talk about the RAM fam a lot, and we all know what most of us, some of you may be new here, but most of us know what it's like to be a member of the RAM fam, and there's honestly really nothing better. I can't imagine working for a place that is more of a family than we are here at Angelo State. So when it comes to being a member of the RAM fam, these issues that I'm talking about today, if you see this in something with a friend or a member of your organization, not only are we here for you to report to, but we're also here for you to walk through how you can help and be what we call an active bystander. So someone who can speak up and say, hey, I'm not sure this is right. I'm not sure that, tell me about how you're feeling. What do you think about this type of behavior? And are you okay? Do you feel safe? And we can certainly help you walk through that. If you're a new student, you've taken our sexual assault prevention for undergraduates, and those scenarios really truly do walk you through some of these potential issues and kind of give you some advice on how you might intervene safely. So dating violence is one of those things that starts as small, calculated behaviors that may turn into something more physical or more even just emotionally impactful in a person's life. So sexual assault is another form of behavior that is prohibited by our Title IX policies. Sexual assault is non-consensual sexual contact or non-consensual sexual penetration. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about consent after this slide. And then last but not least, public indecency. So when we're talking about public indecency as it relates to to Title IX, we're talking about exposing yourself or doing sex acts in public for the intent of receiving sexual gratification. So again, all of these behaviors are covered by our policies, and really most of them are based on consent. So when we talk about consent, hopefully most of you have seen the T video. It's a lot cooler than me talking today, but it's a great explanation, even though it's kind of silly, about what consent is, right? So consent is an agreement between two people to engage in sexual activity, okay? So I want you to think about like when you, sign a contract, or even as silly as it may seem, when you and your friend decide to order a pizza, right? So you agree on what, whether you want Pizza Hut or Domino's or Papa John's, where are you going to get it, right? You agree on what toppings you like. Maybe you agree that, well, I don't really like mushrooms, but I'll trade you can put mushrooms on half, I'll put olives on the other half, right? There's a back and forth in terms of coming to a consensus as to what you both agree upon and what you both like. Okay, so I know it sounds really silly, but it's negotiating and contracting is where we get to what we want, right? So we want to make sure that both parties are free to engage, right? Which means that they have to be of sound mind. They have to be, they can't be intimidated or coerced, right? So negotiating in terms of mushrooms on half and olives on half, there's no coercion in that. I'm not telling you have to eat the mushrooms because they're my favorite. And if you don't love me, right? That would be coercion. I'm not intimidating you. I'm not saying if you don't eat mushrooms, I'm never going to hang out with you again, right? Again, don't mean to be super silly on this, but it really is a great depiction of what consent looks like. So again, it's an agreement between two people. It has to be given freely from each party's every single time. So just because you've had sex with your partner before and it's been consensual doesn't mean that it's consensual the next time. So have discussions, even if it's you're not in a relationship, about what you're comfortable with to what you're agreeing to do. Consent can be withdrawn at any point, so it's important that you check in with your partner, make sure that each step of the way is something that you're both engaged in and comfortable with. If there's any question that your partner is uncomfortable, you ask them if they'd like to continue, or really even better, just stop, right? Just stop and catch your breath, make sure that everybody's on the same page before you move forward. Consent cannot be given if it's a result of threat, violence, intimidation, coercion, or incapacitation. I always like to cover that incapacitation is not necessarily having drinks, right? So again, drunk people consensually have sex all the time. That's something that can occur, but it's something that if your partner is beyond knowing the who, what, where, when that is going on, they're too drunk to make decisions about consent or about really anything else. So I think that's an area that I just always encourage students to tread lightly and consider, again, that consent is something that should be active, and it should be something that everybody's kind of really excited about versus something that you're questioning. So if you're questioning, just don't do it. Maybe hang out another time when you feel like it's more appropriate. So examples of sexual harassment, I'm going to let you all look over this. They're pretty self-explanatory. I've given you examples on the little wheel that we looked at earlier, but these are more specific examples of straight up sexual harassment, or could even be considered sexual misconduct or stalking. Sexual assault or stalking. Okay, so if a student experiences these types of behaviors, and especially maybe you have a member in your organization that experiences, so our goal is for you to report to the Title IX office, which I'm gonna come back to that slide, I'm sorry, but you can either come by our office anytime in the Meyer Administration Building, room 210. You can call the number that's listed here on the slide, 942-2022, or you can fill out an incident report. So this report is available 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. You can fill it out online, even on your phone. It's angelo.edu/incident-form. So a couple things that I get questions about this incident report on. One, who sees it? So if you select on this nature of incident, so down at the bottom where it says nature of incident, on that drop down, if you select Title IX, my office are the only people who see this report. Okay, so I just want to make sure you know that there are 2 people in my office plus my boss, who's our general counsel, that see the report come in. The reason that the 3 of us all see it is so that in case, maybe I'm on vacation or maybe I'm having phone trouble, who knows, but someone is going to follow up with you. We try to follow up on every report within 48 hours via email, okay? So depending on the types of reports that we're dealing with and what's going on, it may be a little bit later, but that's rarely the case, okay? We're gonna send you an email, and we're essentially gonna ask you to come in and visit with us. When you come in and talk to us, it's up to you how much you want to share and what you want to tell us. You're not obligated to tell us anything, but the more you tell us, the more we're able to help you. So our first goal is making sure that you're safe. Our second goal is providing you any resources or support that you might need. So for example, maybe you've missed class and you need us to visit with your professors about making up some assignments you missed. Maybe the person who hurt or harmed you lives in the same residence hall as you or knows where you live, so you need to move. Maybe it's something completely different and something that's not mentioned on our website or not covered today, and that's okay too. So our role is to be the middleman and help you get whatever it is that you might need in order to continue being a student. The second thing that we want to follow up on is whether you'd like to file a formal complaint and use our disciplinary or our grievance process to address your concerns. So we'd also assist you in determining whether you want to file a police report. So we do have to provide details of the incident, not your name, not your information, to the police department to comply with another federal law, but we don't share any information about you or who's involved. We also don't follow up with what we call the respondent, or the person who's alleged to have violated our policies, unless you give us permission to do so. Okay, and a couple other things, and these are all questions that I've received from students. One, we have an amnesty policy, which means that if you were drinking or utilizing drugs or violating another policy when this incident occurred, we don't investigate that. So we are concerned about the Title IX issue. So if you do decide to file a formal complaint, or even if you just want to gather information about doing that, those are not things that we look into. We might talk to you about whether you need help or need support in addressing those concerns, but ultimately we're looking at this issue related to sexual misconduct. The second thing is, when you file a report, it creates an online file that allows us to see any other files that include the same people. Okay, so say you filed a complaint about Jane and about sexual harassment. Jane is a serial butt grabber. She's just, every time she goes to a party, she's grabbing people's butts, okay? And Jane, this is the 3rd report we've received on Jane for the same type of behavior. Okay, so the first person said, I just thought this was weird, I wanted to let you know. The second person said, I was at this party, I didn't really know who it was, but this is what the person looked like, this is what happened. It matched the first report, but we're not positive that it was Jane. But then you submit the report. Well, we're gonna reach out to everybody we can and say, hey, we think we have a persistent problem that could be a risk to the university community, and we'd like to pursue a formal complaint, okay? So my point with that is, when you report something, it creates a file that exists basically for forever. So whether I'm here or no matter what happens, that file remains in existence. So if there is, if something happens more than one time, we can come back to the students and say, hey, would you like to file a formal complaint? So it does create a record, okay? You can use this form and file an anonymous complaint. The challenge with this is we really want to help you. We really want to follow up on your concerns. We want to tell you what all your options are. We want to share what support services are available. And very often when you file an anonymous complaint, it really inhibits our ability to do that. So we may not have the information we need to follow up. We have no idea who you are, how to get a hold of you. And we just hate that because we do want to be able to help you with that. But we'd rather have some information than none, so I don't want to discourage you from reporting anonymously, but I do want to make sure you know that it's very, very difficult for us to follow up depending on what information is shared or not shared. So I've already kind of covered this, but what we will do if we follow up with you is we'll email about 3 times. Sometimes we'll call before we close the case. And even if we close the case, we're still here for you. So if in 6 months you decide you want to come in and talk to us, but you weren't ready to talk to us right after the incident, that's perfectly fine. We're glad to help you anytime, whenever you're ready. We explain your options. And then, like I said, we inform students of all your resources and accommodations, including working with the criminal side of things. But that's your option. You don't have to do that. You can choose to do nothing. Maybe you just want to access support services. Maybe you want to use our complaint process along with that of the criminal side of things. We're happy to help you facilitate whatever you want to do. That's your choice in that. The reason that we leave that up to the student is so that they are empowered to make their own choices. And research shows that sexual assault or sexual misconduct takes away a person's power. So giving a person the option in how they want to address concerns or how they want to follow up and how they want to handle the situation empowers them and gives them the power back. So last but not least, I want to tell you about who you can talk to confidentially. So say you want to talk to someone, but you're not ready to file a complaint, you're not ready to make a report, you really just want to talk to somebody about how you feel. These resources on campus are not obligated to report to us. So everybody else on our campus are considered mandatory reporter per Texas state law. So if you tell a faculty member, you tell a staff member or a professional staff member, they are obligated by state law to talk to us. That being said, if you're not ready for that, here are some resources for you. So the University Health Clinic, the Counseling Center, or the 24-hour crisis helpline, any type of clergy that work with our student organizations, or off-campus advocacy centers such as Open Arms. I do want to make sure and just inform you and be very transparent that if you talk to someone at the Counseling Center, again, they're obligated to provide information about each incident. So again, they just have to report to my office per Texas state law what was reported. So they had 1 instance of sexual assault. They had 1 instance of sexual harassment. I don't know any names or details, but that's it. So I just want to be clear with you if you're ever to see that report that there are no names or information included in that. So the crisis helpline, I mentioned that as a confidential resource. Here's the number for that. I always like to explain I was part of the group that developed this resource for students, and I wish we wouldn't have had called it the crisis helpline because you do not have to be in crisis to use it, okay? So this is here to help students, even if it's, with homesickness, or maybe they're just really having a hard time, studying for an exam, or they're worried about a test. There's nothing too big or too small to call the crisis helpline for. Everything that you visit with them about is completely confidential. They are aware of all of the resources on our campus. So if you do want to make a counseling appointment, they'll contact the counseling center. If you want to file a complaint or file a report through the Title IX office, they'll tell you how to do that as well. So if you're just not sure what to do, you can always call this number and visit with someone at the crisis helpline. And that's all for me. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you being present today. If you have questions, like I said, the most important thing is to remember that my name is Michelle Miller, and you can find me in the Meyer Administration building, room 210. My email address is michelle.miller@angelo.edu, and we're thrilled to help you with anything you might need. Hope you have a safe and happy fall semester.
Hi, I'm Sam Spooner, Director of Risk and Emergency Management. As part of this state-mandated training, I will be taking the next few minutes to cover some topics important to identifying and mitigating risks while hosting events on or off campus. For each event hosted on or off campus, an activity coordinator is recommended. The activity coordinator will assess the risk of hosting each of the event's activities. Do any of the activities have known hazards or risks for injury, damage to property, or damage to the organization's reputation? If so, how can the hazards and risks be eliminated or mitigated? Plan on the need to have release forms for events on ASU property. They will be required for events and activities with elevated risk. You will need a process for ensuring that participants have signed the form, and using a wristband is a common practice. The release forms ASU uses have been reviewed by General Counsel and include assumption of risk, release from liability, and indemnification. Please consult our office for risk elimination and mitigation ideas. Prior to hosting an event, please conduct a site survey of the location or venue to evaluate its condition and capability to handle the size of the event. In addition, identify the locations of fire extinguishers, evacuation routes, and fire exits. Also take note of whether or not sprinklers, smoke detectors, and emergency lighting are present. Be sure to let people know the emergency procedures for the location and locate utility shutoffs and/or know who to call for help. All students and RSOs are required to follow fire and life safety codes when hosting events on or off campus. This means you must actively monitor activities throughout the event to reduce risk and minimize the consequences of an incident should it occur. Prior to hosting an event, develop emergency contingency plans and share those plans with RSO leaders for fires, inclement weather, utility outages, and/or medical emergencies. The goal is to have discussed and know what to do if the unexpected does actually happen. Here are some things to think about if you're driving. Consider alternative methods of transportation, especially if you're going a long distance in a very short time frame. Complete a vehicle safety check, but anticipate or prepare for emergency expenses associated with travel. Plan to take a 15-minute break for every 2 hours of driving or 100 miles. When assigning someone to perform a task involving driving, consider their physical and mental state. Consider the length of the trip and the number of available drivers. Check weather and road conditions prior to departure. Consider the risk associated with being stranded during severe weather and pack an emergency kit. Also, remember that students must comply with the Student Code of Conduct at all times while traveling. All drivers and passengers must comply with all applicable traffic laws and regulations. Drivers should act responsibly and use sound judgment. Drivers must not drive under the influence or transport or possess alcoholic beverages, illegal drugs, unauthorized firearms, or other types of weapons. Drivers and passengers must wear seat belts at all times. The number of occupants in the vehicle must not exceed the number of seat belts. Based on ASU's operating policy 70.09, which I recommend you review, the general requirements for the student travel process include: an employee must be accountable for out-of-town trips involving departmental, student groups, or sponsored student organizations and ensure that all travel documents are completed prior to travel. An accountable employee must accompany the students unless prior approval to travel without accompaniment is granted by the appropriate vice president on the student group travel form. Student organizations interested in traveling throughout the semester must have one member or advisor who is traveling attend risk management training. Organizations must complete the student travel packet and individual travel forms on the RSO website for all travel 10 days prior to traveling. Students traveling must be enrolled in good standing and at least 18 years of age. Students must have personal automobile insurance and current registration as required by state law if a personal vehicle is used. And as noted earlier, students must comply with the Student Code of Conduct at all times. Each trip participant must complete a student activity release form and/or a student activity release form private vehicle and return it to the department administrator who is responsible for retaining the releases. In addition, please complete the Clery travel information via the Chrome River application. The advisor or RSO representative should organize all the documentation to ensure compliance. I'm going to discuss adopting a risk management policy for event activities and how to use a risk management matrix to determine the likelihood and severity of an incident. According to state law, RSOs need to actively reduce the severity of risks and probability that something will go wrong. This is why an event activity coordinator should be assigned. The activity coordinator needs to identify risky behavior, activities, and hazards, assess the probability of adverse outcomes, identify and implement controls to eliminate or reduce the risk and hazards, reassess the activity after the risks and hazards have been managed, and create an emergency response plan should an incident occur. A risk management matrix is a simple tool to use for assessing the severity and likelihood of an incident. Determine the level of risk associated with your event activities by applying the matrix shown on the slide. The goal is to have unlikely and negotiable or low-risk activities. Once finished, determine if you reach an acceptable level of risk by applying risk management strategies. If not, consider modifying or eliminating activities that have unreasonable risk associated with them. For example, deciding to drive to Corpus Christi from ASU after a full day of classes and 4 hours at a part-time job would be taking unnecessary risk. When applying the risk matrix, the likelihood of falling asleep at the wheel is high and the severity of an incident is catastrophic. As the activity coordinator, you would mitigate those risks by getting a good night's sleep and leaving in the morning. As an RSO, you have the responsibility to provide safe and fun activities for yourself and for your participants. Remember to consult EHSRM for risk-reducing strategies if you're hosting an activity where injury or damage to property may occur. Our goal is to say yes to an event, but only if it maintains the health and safety of the participants involved.
Hello, I'm Emily Knopp, the Audit Director at Angelo State University. Over the next several minutes, I want to share with you various activities and best practices you can follow to protect your student organization's financial standing. As leaders in your student organization, you're responsible for its financial activities. Understanding potential fraud schemes, the red flags to look for, and the best practices that you can take to prevent fraud will further the success of your organization. But first, let's define fraud. Fraud is any intentional act or omission designed to deceive others and resulting in a victim suffering a loss and/or the perpetrator achieving a gain. The Texas Tech Board of Regents have further defined fraud as the false representation of a matter of fact, whether by words or by conduct, by false or misleading allegations, or by concealment of that which should have been disclosed. The key phrase to remember when we're thinking about fraud is that fraud is the intent to deceive. It's also important to note that Texas Tech system does not require a legal determination of fraud to call an action of an employee or a student fraud. If the action meets the Regents' definition, then there's cause enough for actions and consequences. Most fraudsters are not career criminals. They're just everyday people who commit fraud under pressure. The vast majority of fraudsters are first-time offenders, with only 5% having been convicted of a fraud-related offense previously. Someone you think would never commit a fraud can, given certain circumstances. Back in the 1960s, Dr. William Cressy developed what we now know as the fraud triangle. The fraud triangle presents the factors that must be present for fraud to happen. Those factors are pressure, rationalization, opportunity, and most recently, capability. Pressures or the incentive is why people commit fraud. Typically, a person is committing fraud for a reason, and that pressure is something they either feel or that is perceived. Second is rationalization. This is how they justify to themselves that their crime is okay. A person has to be able to live with themselves after the fact. Third is the opportunity, which is when the environment is such that the crime can occur. Limiting the opportunity is really the only thing that you can do to prevent the fraud. What you may see as red tape is really the internal controls needed to reduce that opportunity. And finally is capability, which came out about 20 years ago. Capability is when the person committing the fraud has the knowledge, skills, abilities, and the position within the organization to actually conduct the fraud. I want to walk you through a couple of fraud schemes that could impact your student organization if you're not watching closely. The first is cash larceny. Cash larceny, in its simplest terms, is theft and can occur anytime someone has access to cash, whether that's in the forms of dues to your organization or payments your organization makes. There are 3 types of cash larceny. First is altering cash counts. This is simply manually altering the record of cash, which could be a deposit slip or a receipt book. Second is theft of cash from a deposit. At some point when you're collecting funds, someone is going to have to physically take that cash or those checks to the bank. This will give a person the opportunity to take a portion of the money prior to depositing it. And then lastly is deposit lapping. Lapping occurs when someone steals the deposit from one day, then replaces it with day 2's deposit. And then they start over with day 2 and they replace it with day 3 and so on. In this case, the perpetrator is always going to be at least 1 day behind. So if you think cash has been taken, look for some red flags. First and foremost, cash is going to be missing. Also, a deposit could be delayed and not taken to the bank timely. Another flag could be that one person is doing everything. To mitigate theft, make sure more than one person is involved in collecting, recording, and reconciling funds. This is what we call segregation of duties. Also, perform a detailed reconciliation of bank statements to your known monthly activity. Know what amount was taken to the bank and then verify that amount and the tender type, such as was it cash or checks, posted to the bank account. Another scheme to be aware of is fraudulent disbursement, which can occur in a variety of ways. First is through the mischaracterization of expense reimbursements. This is one of the most basic expense reimbursement schemes and is perpetrated by simply requesting reimbursement for a personal expense, but claiming that expense as business related. Another way is through fictitious expense reimbursements and seeking reimbursement for an expense that actually never occurred. Fraudsters may also try to overstate expense reimbursements. Instead of seeking reimbursement for personal expenses, they will overstate the cost of an actual business expense, either through altering receipts or by over-purchasing items. It's important to also keep an eye on multiple reimbursements. This scheme involves the submission of a single expense, but several times. This could happen when someone puts an expense on the debit card and then submits it for reimbursement separately. Some of the flags to be aware of here are fuzzy support and details, missing receipts, and even look for altered receipts. Always go back to the litmus test. If the details don't make sense, then ask more questions and ask for more information. The reimbursement request should always have a legitimate business purpose. In fact, if a member of your organization requests reimbursement, require them to submit the original receipt with an itemized list of what was purchased, where it was purchased, the date of the purchase, and the amount of the purchase. Their request should also include a detailed reason as to why they purchased the item on their own instead of going through the organization's treasury and asking them to purchase it. Again, make sure someone within your organization is reconciling the bank account. I'm going to talk about reconciliation here in a little bit. So now that we kind of know what schemes we can look for, I want to talk through what some of the financial best practices you should have in place within your student organization. Your student organization should establish a bank account that is separate and apart from the university, with an account name that does not imply that Angelo State has any ownership or control of that account and funds. Additionally, consider these following practices. Obtain and maintain a taxpayer identification number. Limit the number of authorized check signers and update that list as often as needed. If possible, have 2 signatures on all checks. Limit the use of a debit card and ensure that they are only issued in the name of the organization. If a debit card is used, receipts must be provided and maintained for a period of time. Send the bank accounts to an individual within the organization who is not an authorized check signer. This person should then promptly reconcile the bank statements when they're received. Ideally, reconcile monthly. Similar to your own finances, your student organization account should be well managed and secured. A well-managed account includes the following actions. Assign responsibility for financial oversight. Who's responsible for the finances of the organization? Establish up-to-date budgets for the year and for events and activities that you have through the year. Measure actual event expenditures against the budget. Define who has custody of both the checkbook and the debit card. And then limit the number of people who can actually use the debit card. If you have a debit card, implement a checkout procedure as well so that you know who is using the debit card, why they're using it, and what they purchased. Reconcile accounts for all transactions on the bank statement by agreeing the bank statement to a secondary source. The secondary source is generally your check register or all of the receipts you've collected for the month when the debit card was used. And finally, provide regular financial updates to your advisors, the officers of your organization, and the members of your organization. Generally, the treasurer will be responsible for providing these financial updates to the organization as a whole. Faculty and staff advisors should also periodically review financial activity and the reconciled bank statements. Review the use of the debit cards, and then question anything that looks odd or doesn't make sense. Earlier, I mentioned the concept of segregation of duties. Simply stated, segregation of duties means that the functions or transactions are divided so that no one person has control over all parts of a transaction. Whenever possible, different people should be involved in each step of a financial process. For instance, one person should be responsible for receiving or making payments. By this I mean someone's responsible for collecting dues or using the debit card writing checks. A second person should be assigned the responsibility to actually record that transaction or record the payments, meaning updating the check registry or preparing the deposit if you've collected funds. Then a third person should be responsible for comparing the records, meaning someone's responsible for reconciling, taking that check register and those receipts and comparing them to the bank statement. But what if your organization only has 2 people available to be involved in this transaction? Segregation of duties can still be achieved, as the one collecting the funds and the reconciler can be the same person. However, whoever is preparing the deposit should not perform any other tasks within the transaction. So to recap, how can you protect the financial standing of your student organization? First, ensure proper segregation of duties is in place. No one person should have singular control of any transaction. Second, reconcile bank statements monthly and present the fiscal health of the organization to the advisor and the membership as a whole, and do this at least annually. Third, limit and control the use of the debit card and require that detailed receipts be provided. And finally, just simply limit who has authority over the bank account, who has authority over your money. If you follow these simple practices, you will help to mitigate the risk of financial loss to your organization.
Hi, my name is Erika Baeza. I'm the Director for Multicultural and Student Activities. I will be covering the Diversity and Inclusion section for your RSOs. Exploring diversity helps ensure student leaders and RSOs are able to engage and work within our diverse university setting, which adds value to ASU. Learn how to create more inclusive environments is really important. To do this, embrace the complexity of diversity. Be willing to learn and appreciate diversity, inclusion, and cultures. Strive to understand others, even when it may be uncomfortable, to expand and respectfully challenge our diversity of thought. Under state and federal law, no individual will be excluded from participation in or be denied the benefit of or be subjected to discrimination based on disability under any system, program, or activity. This includes extracurricular programs such as student organization, club sports, and any other student activity. This may mean making reasonable modifications and providing aids and services that are necessary to ensure that qualified individuals with disabilities have an equal opportunity to participate. As representatives of ASU organizations, you should avoid discrimination and promote equal access in programs and activities to all students, regardless of ability, ethnicity, gender, or any other differences. It is often said that diversity is having a seat at the table, inclusion is having a voice, and belonging is having that voice be heard. It is your responsibility to include, value, and make sense of belonging within your RSO. A person with a disability is one who has a physical or mental impairment, has a record of such an impairment, is regarded as having an impairment, Programs and activities will not operate on the basis of generalizations, assumptions, prejudice, or stereotypes about disabilities, generally or specific disabilities in particular. It is your RSO's responsibility to provide accommodations for your meetings, activities, and any other events. One way to do this is to have people register for the event and ask if they need any accommodations. If you have specific questions or concerns about making accommodations for individuals with disabilities, contact Dr. Swafford. Other types of inclusion are social inclusion, which is physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and quality of life. Another one is emotional inclusion. There's also intellectual, spiritual, and comprehensive inclusion. Practice cultural humility. Principles are critical self-reflection, ongoing learning, understanding, and curiosity. Attitude, be willing to be vulnerable, humble, know that you do not always have the right answers. Be a lifelong learner. Practice empathy and equality. Reduce negative power relationships. Again, it is your responsibility as leaders that everyone is appreciated and included in your RSO.
Reminder of risk management. Section 51.9361, Risk Management Programs for Members and Advisors of RSOs. Presidents and other RSO leaders must attend risk management training. Advisors must attend risk management training or have a completion of an appropriate computer-based risk management assessment program. The RSO shall present the information to all RSO members during their first meeting, and that is with full membership. The president or advisor shall provide the MSAP with a report of the program content at the meeting, list of attendance, and date and time. Risk management completion deadline is September 15, 2021. This concludes risk management training. Thank you.